Hello, all. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants from all over the world. Thank you and welcome for joining us in the inaugural webinar of our Gas Talk, MDBs, and Gas Webinar series. I'm Fiza Qureshi, gas campaigner working with Big Shift Global and the moderator of today's webinar. This webinar series is the initiative of Big Shift Global's Global Don't Fund Gas Working Group. As you all are aware that the Big Shift Global is a multi-stakeholder global campaign coordinated by organizations from the Global North and Global South. Together, we aim to make the people's views on energy finance known to multilateral development banks and the members' countries. Title of our today's webinar is Gas or Green? Assessing Financial Institutions' Strategies. Now, I would call upon Sophie Richmond, the global lead of Big Shift Global, to formally welcome you all in this webinar and also share the objectives of this series and today's webinar. Over to you, Sophie.
Thanks very much, Fiza, and really happy to see everybody here. As some of you may know, we began to develop further joint work on gas and had some initial meetings of the gas working group last year because we'd identified many loopholes for gas across many of the MDBs, and we also knew that many groups were working on this already. So we wanted to look at how we could join forces on some key pieces of advocacy and campaigning at the global level. And I'm really delighted that Fiza is now part of Big Shift to really take forward this work on gas. And we thought there's so much work and expertise on gas among the groups that we're working with that it made sense to develop this webinar and begin to share together a picture of where the MDBs are at with gas. So as Fiza mentioned, this is the first webinar in the series, and it comes off the back of many of the AGMs of the key MDBs and the World Bank Spring meetings. So it seemed a good moment to assess where the banks are at and make some comparisons across their approaches to gas. So really happy to have all the panelists here today to talk about that. I also just wanted to mention that Fiza will be bringing the gas working group back. And so in a moment, I'm just going to put a link in the chat if you're interested to sign up, if you're not already part of that list, to receive further information about that. But I will stop there. I'm really happy to have everyone here. Huge thanks to Fiza for organising and the panelists and everyone here who's listening in. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And well said, as the MDBs are increasingly discussed as the vehicle for delivering more climate finance, it is important to scrutinize the policies and positions they held on energy finance specifically. So now I would like to briefly introduce our enlightened speakers and today's agenda. Marjorie, finance campaigner from Recourse, will share her analysis on the strategies of the World Bank Group in the context of post-spring meetings. Ryan Hassan, Executive Director of NGO Forum on ADB, will enlighten us on post-AGM ADB's strategies. After these two speakers, we will take questions from the audience. So I would request you all to post your questions in the Q&A section. If you will raise the hand, we will enable your mic and you can come up and speak as well. So after that session, Dean Bebe from Don't Gas Africa and Gilgore, gas campaign leader from Bankwatch, will talk about African Development Bank and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development strategies in the context of their recent EGMs. Afterwards, again, we will have 15 minutes Q&A slot, and then we will conclude our today's webinar. So without wasting any time, turning to Marge, finance campaigner from RICOS. She was the active part of recent spring meetings of the World Bank Group in April at DC. And she monitors the portfolios of IFC, ADB, and the AIIB for gas exposures, including through financial intermediaries. So thank you very much, Marge, for joining us today. My question, thank you, Marge. My question is, as you monitor different IFIs, so in comparison to other multilateral development banks, how do the World Bank's investment strategies, particularly regarding gas financing, stack up?
Thanks, Fiza. And I see that my slide is already on the screen. Thank you so much for the introductions. And yeah, so I'm Marjorie, finance campaigner for Recourse. Fiza's already mentioned what I focus on, and I would just like to add a little bit more information that lately I've been also looking at the multilateral investment guarantees agencies portfolio and how they enable these guarantees enable fossil fuel investments directly and indirectly. So next slide, please. So from the recent spring meetings, now how does the World Bank's gas or financing compared to others is, and how does it support fossil fuel investments? So I have two main takeaways from the recent World Bank spring meetings. One is the stark lack of commitment to end fossil fuel investments. I have a small quote there from one of my conversations with the bank staff. And two, there's this very strong push for corporate/private sector centered, bigger, better bank narrative in the World Bank's evolution that I think spells danger for both climate and human rights. Next, please. So let me go back to the first takeaway on the lack of commitment to end fossil fuels. We've been asking during our conversations with the World Bank EDs and also the staff, we repeatedly asked them if they have this end game or an end date for gas, if they have this horizon date where they foresee that they will end financing for gas, because we know that they're still doing it. But the most common answer from EDs, including the staff from the bank and MIGA, was that either as soon as we can or as soon as possible. So there's no definite date, even though the bank says that we will support the transition, we are lessening our financing for fossil fuels, we want to end poverty in a livable planet as their new mandate. But that is worrying because they cannot even tell when they can stop or they plan to stop funding climate wrecking projects, no? So first, there is indeed a reduction in the investments of the World Bank in its in fossil fuels, at least in the direct ones which we can monitor. It has coal exclusion policy, but it doesn't have for gas. So if there's this graph that you could see here on the left or right side of the screen, which shows the clean and the fossil gas and oil investments of the different multilateral development banks from 2020 until 2022. So the green ones are the clean investments, the brownish ones are the investments on oil and gas from 2020 to 2022. So you can see that there is indeed a decrease in the investments for fossil gas and oil. But if you look at the World Bank, which is this figure on the far on my, at least from my, when I look at it from the farthest right side, there is still substantial funding from the World Bank on fossil gas, and in fact, it has allotted most of the funding for fossil gas from 2020 to 2022. In contrast, the European Investment Bank seems to be doing more in terms of funding more renewables and drastically decreasing its funding for fossil oil and gas. This data is available on the OCI's website for public financing monitoring. But we still don't have figures yet for 2023 and 2024, but we know that they do and have approved and invested in projects that are gas or gas related, such as the two gas-fired power plants in Uzbekistan, the Sirdarya and Surkundarya, financed by the IFC and the IBRD. The other one in Uzbekistan is also financed by the AIB and the IDB. Right before the annual meetings in 2023, IFC approved this technical assistance for Morocco to improve or to build its LNG industry. And in 2020, right before New Year, the IFC approved the financing for Africa 50, which is a private equity, which is an equity fund that will invest in infrastructure in Africa, including gas projects in that region. So indeed, there's a reduction, but they're still doing it. We can see how much that they're putting it into, but as far as the financial intermediaries, we don't know. Second is that they have this inadequate green equity approach, which supposedly allows their clients to move out of gas, but unfortunately, move out of coal, but unfortunately, it is voluntary and it does not include captive coal. And then the Paris alignment, as we know, has no exclusions for gas. And then next slide, please. The other one that really worried me after the spring meetings is the corporate private sector approach, which has dangers for climate and human rights. So there's this push for attracting and leveraging private sector investments, including guarantees and insurance for private investors to the MIGA one-stop shop. But you can see in the right side the MIGA's history on financing or guaranteeing fossil fuel investments. There's also that World Bank Corporate Scorecard on Energy Access, which includes a scorecard on energy access and how the World Bank supposedly improving energy access. But if you look at it more closely, it does not have focus on access to clean energy, and it does not have some disaggregation on the access to clean energy by marginalized sectors. So from this, we can imply that there's a preference or there's a space for gas in the investments for energy access, and there might be indicate a preference for large-scale renewable energy projects, which has more risks in terms of social and environmental risks. Next slide, please. And then there's also that increasing FI investments. So between 2018 to 2022, the IFC's portfolio has more than half of its investments as investments in financial intermediaries. Same with the ADB's non-sovereign investments. Half of it is made of financial intermediaries. This is worrying because these financial intermediaries are not really transparent, and if we don't have the transparency, they cannot really be held accountable, and they are really very difficult to monitor as per our experience. But we do know that there are some examples that have been recently been made, like for example, the AIB and the ADB's Bayfront Infrastructure Capital, which invests in LNG infrastructure, ADB's Clifford Capital, which also invests in LNG infrastructure, including the one in Batangas in my country. AIB also has Keppel Asia Infrastructure Fund, which also invests in LNG infrastructure, including the Keppel Sakra Cogen, which boasts to be the hydrogen-ready gas-fired power plant. And lastly, the IFC also has this insurance FI, the PVI Holdings, which provides insurance and guarantees to fossil fuels in projects in Vietnam, not only gas, but also coal projects, including in coal projects in 2023. So this is my last slide. Next slide, please. So for upcoming opportunities for MDB engagement, so we know that the World Bank as well as the ADB and also the IIB has continues to fund fossil gas. Their policies, their Paris alignment policies are not enough to exclude gas in their list of non-aligned investments, and their strategies also allow for gas. So we have these list of opportunities for MDB engagement where we could still hound the MDBs and for them to get out of funding fossil gas. So I think I need to stop, and I'll welcome questions later for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marge, for sharing your insights and, of course, the valuable suggestions for future campaign focus. And also, thank you for giving the comparison between World Bank Group strategies and other MDBs and ADB as well. So, coming to Ryan Hassan, Executive Director of NGO Forum on ADB. He's a Bangladeshi national pursuing a PhD in political science, and he currently leads the strategic direction of the network towards holding ADB and AIIB accountable. At present, the forum is advocating for a full fossil fuel phase out of ADB and AIIB energy finance and calls both banks out for a just transition towards renewable energy bearing all false solutions. So thank you, Ryan, for sparing your time from very hectic schedule. So we understand this. It has always been challenging to switch from one big movement like AGM to another like Asia Clean Energy Forum. So, but thanks for the incredible work you people are doing.
Thank you, Disharji, and thank you, Dixit. I apologize, everyone. I'm in a very loud environment. Moving very quickly, what I wanted to do was speak a little bit about the ADB first, and then later on speak about the AIB, and then come to a little bit about what civil society can do collectively in the campaigns towards building up control in these particular IFI. Very quickly, if you look at some of the figures over time with the ADB, you will notice that if you just look at the numbers, the scale and size of fossil fuel projects in comparison to renewable energy.
Your voice is, sorry, Ryan, your voice is also low. Not only there is the noise in the background, but your own voice is also a little low. So
how about now? Is it better now?
it's little better, little better. Please go ahead.
All right, I'll project a little bit louder. So if you basically look at the size of fossil fuel investments from 2015, you will notice that the size of the projects went from 200 megawatts in 2015 to 900 megawatts in 2016. By the time we reach 2018, you go into the gigawatt scale of fossil fuel investments in terms of power generation, and this has been a trend, really. Just taking off from where Marjorie's presentation was, I think we're touching upon some of the same projects. For example, the Batangas project in the Philippines, which is ADB financed. There is a plethora of gas projects in Pakistan, as well as coal projects active in Pakistan. There is a $30 million loan in the Sindh province with Engro LNG Terminal Private Limited. Very interesting one is this technical assistance in Batangas for an LNG, not only one power plant. Technical assistance, as you guys know, is basically kind of like a policy which helps the government sort of prepare a list of project proposals. So if we look at the right, below right corner, this technical assistance will train the Philippines National Oil Company to create proposals for a regasification terminal, a storage terminal, a baseload power plant, and other associated infrastructure associated with gas. So we're not only looking at just gas in terms of power generation, but we're also looking at gas in terms of a very long infrastructure investment, which ties the country into not only a carbon lock-in, but a huge debt burden lock-in as well, from which a renewable energy transition is just pushed farther and farther and farther away. In my own country, in the southwest, 800 megawatt, the Rupcha LNG power plant, our country is facing in Bangladesh a serious foreign currency reserve crisis. If you click on any news in the national dailies, you will realize that the country is depleting uh, foreign reserves just importing energy. So the modus operandi of ADB's finance for lower and middle income countries towards just transition just genuinely does not feel sincere if they're going to keep on pushing for LNG based power systems, and that's something which the forum is strongly opposed. Now, all of these projects which you saw are in 2018, which fall under the 2009 energy policy of the ADB, which had an open door for gas and coal. But now we're in the reality of the 2021 energy policy where, Big Shift and other groups have all combined forces together in pushing towards this new policy. And what did we win? We won the coal win that the ADB has promised to phase out of coal. There are some debates there, of course, on coal, which I'll come to later. But still, we can say that they have stringent language on gas, but in practice, we still saw investments in Kyrgyzstan. We are still seeing consideration of projects in the Philippines. We're still seeing project proposals being discussed in Indonesia on LNG terminals. So it's not a phase out. Now, on Paris alignment and all these things, post 2021, ADB is claiming to be a climate finance bank just because they banned coal. This has been their main, I would say, PR push. But if you genuinely look at ADB's Paris alignment commitment, all they talk about is a very big $100 billion climate finance portfolio, which they failed to unpack. Now, if you look closely, at the 2021 energy policy on gas itself, it very much as my previous speaker and also I think Sophie also mentioned, that gas is perceived as a bridge fuel, and the ADB also frames their approach towards gas in that view. And this bridging fuel definition of gas is deeply problematic. As I will go in my presentation later on coal retirement, you will get to know. So, complete disregard for the IPCC AR6 report that everybody has to deeply decarbonize in order to achieve Paris Agreement. The ADB continues to have a very, very open door towards gas. Now, when it comes to coal, I'll come to that in a little bit. When it comes to coal, though, it was not a full ban. I think recently from Inclusive Development Initiative and local groups in Indonesia, there was a report which came out in the listserv where PLN was still financing coal projects through ADB finance through a financial intermediary. So there are gaps in the system, and we are deeply concerned that the 100 billion climate finance is actually not completely meaningful, and ADB's posture towards being a climate finance bank really is double speak from what they're actually doing. Now, a quick update from our ADB annual governors meeting in Georgia, Tbilisi, which happened in May 2 to 5. We were actively campaigning. As I told Fiza when I was preparing these slides, shocking. The energy department did not show up. So this shows you a very, very interesting dynamic where the entire conversation around Paris Agreement, around energy investment, was completely left out of the public domain in the ADB annual governors meeting because nobody from the ADB headquarters showed up. The only place where we managed to get audience from the ADB side was in our Just Transition panel, where the director for the energy department, Mr. Priyanta, came in via an online and made a few, grandmotherhood statements about their energy 2021 policy and their gas guidance note. and told us to while our debunking gas as a bridge fuel, and we started talking about from ground experience against large hydro, against the problems with large geothermals in Indonesia. We were also very, very concerned about this critical mining issue in terms of just transition and ADB energy investment in Mongolia, and all these complex issues. But the overall civil society, I guess, campaign at the ADB annual governors meeting focused on the environmental social safeguards, which are also very relevant to the climate safeguards debate within the ADB, and that we continue to push. For the Asia Clean Energy Forum, as Fiza just mentioned, these are live pictures from last week. Our team is on holiday, resting and recovering. As you can see, right outside Asian Development Bank, the top picture on the left, that's a big mob. That's all of us in the region, APMDD, the Filipino groups, PMCJ, and the Philippine Working Group of the NGO Forum. And we demanded a full exit while the ASEP was happening inside. We also convened a very strong press conference, and we have people speaking on gas and fossil fuel phase out. We had people speaking on the false claims of coal retirement. We have people speaking against incinerator investment, and it was really well picked up by the media as well. And if you see that big picture with my colleague Jen, who's not happy at all, shaking hands with the ADB, and that's Heidi Pugh from the NGO Center. Jen is carrying our ASEP statement, which was submitted both online and offline to the board of directors as well, which called for a full gas phase out in the upcoming energy policy review, provided we get the station. Very quickly on ETM, I will not go through my wordy slide, but on the early transition mechanism, the first pilot project was Cirebon 1 in Indonesia for 650 megawatts. We've been fighting the ETM for a long time, for the last 2 years, and we at least hope that ADB would commit that the coal power plant would be retired by 2030. As of 2023 November, we were finally given the news that they cannot ensure that Cirebon 1 will be retired by 2030, and it's an indefinite retirement. So that means they cannot retire coal power plants through this scheme. And this is deeply problematic. The scheme was supposed to be applied to Pakistan. Now it's backtracked as well. It's not touching Pakistan projects. It also does not touch ADB's own fund investments in coal. And just for the second point, as part of coal retirement, they're talking about investing in further gas and LNG as a transition from coal retirement to clean energy. So this also opens the door for further gas investment. I would strongly suggest those in the audience and those in the groups who are working in the energy space to keep a close eye on the early transition mechanism and really call it out as we go into the midterm energy policy review. Very quickly on the AIIB, the policy was reviewed in 2021. I won't go through all of that, but what we won, we got a coal ban, but they never financed it. But AIIB is a very big gas bank and continues to be so, and I think we should remain vigilant. Last slide, concluding reflections. Deeply flawed, more gas is coming, and we have to engage with the director of ADB's energy department. Hopefully, we are going to organize a webinar in the next coming weeks, and we want to get into the consultation process of the upcoming energy policy review. And let's close all these gaps. We can only do it if we work together. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for this loud space and taking too much time.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for this insightful presentation and a lot of things you have shared, the comparisons, the future interventions, a lot of things. So now we are opening the floor for questions and answers regarding the strategies and the future interventions. We talked about the World Bank and ADB. And to moderate this session, I would request Hussein Jarwar, CEO Indus Consortium, which is a network of 60 civil society organizations working on just energy transition and campaigning on gas financing with the World Bank and ADB in Asia region with focus on communities in Pakistan. So over to you, Hussein.
Thank you, Fiza, and thank you, Marge, and thank you, Ryan, for your insightful presentations. And as Marge has highlighted about the spring meeting analysis, and she has also shared the upcoming events with regards to World Bank and other international financial institutions. Ryan Bhai has rightly mentioned about the role of the Asian Development Bank in supporting and providing technical assistance in the gas projects in many South Asian countries. And he has also highlighted some of the analysis of the Pakistan that initially the Asian Development Bank has also started providing technical assistance for the LNG projects, as well as they have announced the technical assistance for the gas storage in Pakistan as well. So I think these are the major issues which has highlighted by the Ryan and Marsh. So we have received four, questions and comments. So we would like request to participants who want to ask a question, unmute themselves and ask their question directly through the microphone. Otherwise, we can share their questions with our participants. So I think there is a first question of Izabatu. Izabatul, can you unmute yourself and put your question?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Big Shift Global, for having this insightful webinar. So my question is actually both from Marjorie and Rayan. As you both have mentioned in your slides about the concessionary financing and indirect financing from the MDBs. So considering that MDBs, they do not have policies which explicitly are against gas, and that gas is strongly viewed as a transition fuel. As you have mentioned with the concessionary financing that is being provided to support it. For instance, Ryan, you have mentioned about Bangladesh, and of course, we also know that their vested interest, it goes beyond Bangladesh. So how do you think civil society organizations, they can counter this narrative, or what role they can play in combating this greenwashing narrative that they have? Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan Bhai. You can share your insights.
Would it be possible so that we can take all the four questions and then our speakers can share their responses?
Yes, okay.
Because we are running little short of time,
Short of
so
time. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yes, I will now invite Crispin that she can share her, comment. I think it's not a question, it's a comment, so she can reflect her. Hello, yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Crispin, yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. You
Okay,
can
great.
ask your question or comment. We can hear you.
I think I just put some question on the chat box. Already see this, so I don't know. So this time, so I would like to make a viewpoint about stop buying fossil fuels in African projects. So this time, so there is so many EF movements and organizations in Africa which worked on that the similar projects. Yeah, the main objective is to push companies which worked on that areas, which work with fossil fuel. Example for Total Energies, and the other company which work there. And the main idea is to push them in order to leave about fossil fuel exploitations in Africa. So it's like it's already started by some campaigning, some match, some litigations, and awareness campaign with young movements, activists, and I push them to stop their activities. And today we can know I can say it should be on 20% about that campaign. So because this time will have many difficulties to do more, to do best that fossil fuels that campaigns. Perhaps we have affected by many difficulties to attend that authorities. The
Thank you,
company
Crispin.
authorities, and they have to tell him that to put them. And there is so many difficulty with support, to doing that. The company has a big risk, and IAF must be
Thank you, Crispin, for your
supported.
brief comment.
Yeah,
Actually, we are short of time.
great.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, I will tell you finish. So IAF will be supported by that to make and to lead that project and their companies in order to up in 2025 to make end
Thank you.
fossil fuels in Africa. Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments. I would like to invite now Kola Ibrahim. Yes, please go ahead, Kola. Kola, are you there?
I think they seem to have dropped off the call, so we might just have to take it from the chat.
Okay, I can share the question. The Kola's question is, given the different debate order, biofuel, can biogas be categorized as a renewable or clean energy or part of fossil fuel? This is important for climate justice campaigner that this also retails to a green hydrogen. So this is the Kola Ibrahim's question. So I think these were three questions we received from the participant. So now I would like to invite both Ryan and Marge to share their insights about those questions. Thank you.
Marge, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. So, okay, so maybe I'll address Isa and Cola's question. So on the campaigning against gas and it is being a transition fuel. Yes, you're correctly, Isa, that the narrative that gas is a transition fuel is still very strong. But when I attended a webinar from GSCC, there has actually been shifts in the narrative on gas. Like, for example, before, gas was seen as this very reliable, inexpensive fuel that could, help us transition. But because of the crisis a year ago, that narrative has weakened a lot. And then I think for us countering this narrative that it is a transition fuel, we need to still emphasize that something very expensive, unreliable, and not controlled by communities and countries cannot help us transition to sustainable renewable energy. Money that should have been going to building renewable energy infrastructure should be going into is now going into gas. And two, in terms of hounding the MDBs and campaigning the MDBs and showing them that this is not a transition, this is a bridge to nowhere, this is a bridge to the clouds. Yeah. I think it's very important for us to highlight community struggles, the impacts that they are saying, because when we talk to banks, they say that this is for communities, this is for energy access. But do we really see communities getting energy access from these big gas-fired power plants that they have built and that they are planning to build? That's another thing that we need to highlight. What is its impacts on the communities, not only in terms of energy access, but also in terms of the overall economic impacts of these gas-fired power plants that they are funding on the macroeconomics, like how these gas-fired power plants are contributing to debt in Bangladesh, debt in Pakistan, and how this goes down the line to families when they experience power cuts because of the LNG being very inexpensive. So that's one on the gas. And then on the biogas. So this conversation has brought up again. I'm not sure about biogas. and how it is produced right now. I'm not sure about the technology. I haven't followed the conversation. But for recourse, we have this yeah, we are doing this study and policy development on the MTBs and how they should be investing in renewables, because for us, just giving money to renewables is not enough. That money that is going to renewables should, one, be accountable, very transparent, and two, it should fund renewables that are respectful, that are upholding human rights. It should not go to wind power plant that grabs land from herders in Uzbekistan, maybe, or to solar power plants that grabs lands from farmers in the Philippines, or from herders in Morocco. So so I guess the debate now is that if banks go into renewables, then are they following human rights? Are they protecting human rights? Are these funds going into projects that truly benefit the people and do not harm do not harm the environment and their rights? Because at the end of the day, we cannot renewable our way into sustainable development. It must be done correctly with human rights in mind and protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Marge. I think you covered a lot of the points which I also would probably touch upon when it comes to the narrative argument and how to campaign against gas. Well, I would probably look at it from the forum lens, and in the forum lens, we tend to look at this from domestic gas and imported gas. That's the first line of the counter narrative that we do, because imported gas puts an enormous financial burden on foreign reserves and the rising debt for lower and middle income countries. Therefore, do not go into technologies where you have to be energy dependent on the global market. And after the Ukrainian war, the spot prices on gas started fluctuating in such a volatile manner that countries like mine had to buy LNG from Qatar at almost 3 times the price of what was there in the national market. The Power Development Board of Bangladesh, one of the engineers who is a whistleblower, he told me in confidence that Bangladesh could not pay Qatar for the last 3 years. And we still need to buy more LNG from Qatar to keep our power plants running. So we're in a deep, deep problem here. We're in a deep problem here, and we do not know how to get out, because the energy import strategy of the government, which has been put into motion for the last 10 years, has put us in this derailed form. So that's why. The second counter narrative that we really need to do is, do you need to generate electricity by burning gas? So there needs to be a power sector analysis, which is extremely important. According to the last ADB Energy Department Director, Yongping Zai, during the 2020 Advocacy on the Energy Policy, he said the phrase, the age of baseload power plants is over, in a meeting. The age of baseload power plants is over. That means there is no need to create baseload, because baseload is already covered. If baseload is already covered, why are you financing new baseload power plants? In the Philippines, why are you financing new baseload power plants in Pakistan? So it's extremely important to see whether the power plant is going to fit the economic need, even if it is from this very neoliberal capitalistic model of industrialization, which is a different debate, but whether the power plant is even necessary. So what we are seeing is a lot of capacity charges, a lot of fossil fuel subsidies for power plants, which are quick rental in nature, where the power is not even being used by the state. So there's overproduction, overcapacity in almost most of the lower income countries. Too much electricity has been produced and that cannot be distributed. So the question is not whether we're going to fight this straight head on against gas, but rather saying, is this the type of 3.5 gigawatt energy actually necessary? Do we need to scale down and look at smaller decentralized options? So that's on our side on the narrative front. On the issue of biofuels, very, very interesting argument. I think the right group would be the Asia Biomass Working Group, who have a strong campaign against biofuel investments. Completely agreeing with Marjorie here. Large amounts of farmlands are being taken over they're producing these weird corn pellets, which cannot be, not even the horses are going to eat it, and it's going to go into an incinerator system to generate electricity. So it displaces the farming community by producing crops which you cannot even consume, with a huge methane emission, which crosses over into GHGs and very much derails from planet. So that is a deep, deep concern in terms of biomass and biofuels. And the last point here is, I think I know less about green hydrogen, but I have somewhat a rough idea about blue hydrogen, because in coal retirement under the ETM, ADB is really promoting blue hydrogen, which is retrofitting coal power plants using hydrogen as the base fuel. But in order to light the hydrogen, they're going to burn gas. So it's once again, in terms of transitioning from coal, you're saying you're going to produce hydrogen and water is going to be the waste. But in order to burn the hydrogen, you're going to import gas again. So there are some very, very complicated technical solutions, mostly being pushed by the Japanese. And I think our friends and allies in Japan who are fighting the energy fight has to call upon this Japanese technology push in this just transition debate, because there are some problems there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Marjorie, for your insights. I think our time is up. So the final benchmark from the discussion of Marjorie and Ryan is that more gas is coming, and MDBs are branding it as as a transitional fuel. So definitely, being a civil society, environmental campaigners, we should continue fight against this greenwash and to work for the acceleration of renewable energy in upcoming events. So that was, I think, the benchmark for today's discussion. Thank you very much. Over to you, Fiza.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hussein, for incredible moderation. And thanks, Ryan Bhai, Marge, for taking up all the questions very well. And thanks, audience, for being proactive and share insightful questions. We are really running short of time. So now moving towards the next part of our webinar, now I would call upon Dean Bebe, Campaigns Manager, PowerShift Africa. He is a PhD candidate and a 2018 Mandela Rhodes Scholar with several years' experience on building and implementing campaign strategies across Africa. Dean, my question to you is that the recent AFDB's AGM marked a significant milestone with the launch of AFDB's new 10-year strategy. So when examining investment priorities and the balance between fossil fuel investments, what insights can be gained regarding the bank's stance on gas projects?
Hi, Fiza. Hi, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me to the wonderful space. Thank you to the previous speakers who set the scene quite beautifully and articulately with regards to gas financing across the global south. Thanks again for your question, Fiza. I think what's important is to really look at first, just right before, the African Development Bank annuals, we had a big study that was conducted around the renewable energy potential across the African continent, essentially. And this was packaged in a way to try and push policymakers to really have an ambitious 10-year business strategy. So we're looking at fundamentally the solar potential versus what has been installed versus the capacity, for example. So in the African context, we're looking at 13 gigawatts that has already been installed versus the potential of over 7,800 gigawatts. We're looking at wind energy. We had mapped out 7 gigawatts installed in comparison to the potential of 479 gigawatts. And then we're looking at the hydropower. We're looking at 34 gigawatts installed versus the potential of over 131 gigawatts. Overall, Africa has just about 8,000 gigawatts potential of renewable energy. And what we did was package this in a very succinct and concise way in order to shift that 10-year business strategy fundamentally for it to not have gas rooted as one of the fundamental transition fuels. What came out of it was positive in different forms. When we got access to the final document, what was great was looking at energy consumption at the household level. What the African Development Bank had taken a stance was that gas wouldn't play a role essentially with regards to how energy access and consumption is understood from a household level. As you know, Africa has over 600 million people without energy access, and that is set to increase to 720 million people if we are to continue on the trajectory of fossil fuels by 2030. However, the 10-year business strategy did highlight gas use within the industrial sector, which again proved to be quite problematic from the civil society end. And what also then made it a little bit less of a success in terms of the 10-year business strategy was the language that was used on the bank wanting to explore alternative energy systems. Although gas wasn't fundamentally defined, it does leave room for it to actually creep in and be viewed again as a transition fuel, which is why it was very important that this 10-year business strategy was complemented by a reviewed energy policy framework, which was only updated in 2019 when Adesina announced that the bank wouldn't be financing any coal, new coal in any case, because at that time they were still finishing up one of the worst investments in South Africa at the Medupi coal plant. But the addendum to the energy policy framework did include coal, but that was the last time, soon after that announcement, did we see the African Development Bank reviewing the energy policy framework, which was meant to be reviewed and out for consultation early this year in February. And that didn't happen, of course, because of the contentious position around gas as a transition fuel within the energy policy framework of the AFDB, which proved quite problematic. So that was put on hold, and it will be reviewed or revisited for it to be shared with civil society for consultation between October 2024 and February 2025. So we needed this little piece of policy to come out to really support the 10-year business strategy. And its absence, again, leaves us at a very precarious position, right? Because obviously one of the big asks, and I think my speakers have already mentioned this, the implementation of a fossil fuel finance exclusion policy across all their finance and policy instruments. We did a study recently where we did unravel that, the bank has been financing fossil fuels. That report can be read under the Still Banking on Fossil Fuels report if you just check it out on the resources section at the Parshift Africa website. I think over 400 million in comparison to the 4 million that has been complemented towards renewable energy projects. And most of this is not direct financing, but also then indirect financing, which becomes a big, big problem. So there's been a strong call for community-led development, which was largely absent in the 10-year business strategy. And the AFDB, as a result, I think at this point, our key ask is the need for them to embed meaningful engagement with communities affected by their projects, whether it's direct or indirect financing, or even offering technical assistance. And this really would ensure that, vulnerable groups, including young people, have access to these consultations, and that there is reasonable follow-up to commitments as well as access to remedy whenever harm is caused. And this is also off the backdrop of, in the pursuit of trying to tackle energy access, with the example of Kenya. The wind project that was implemented in the northern parts in Turkana was a major success, but it came at a dire cost of over 2,000 people being displaced as a result of the African Development Bank trying to push towards the need to actually combat, the discourse around energy access across the African continent. The private sector also showed up quite prominently within the 10-year business strategy, but one of the biggest pushbacks from Africa's end is we wouldn't want to necessarily see the private sector be involved, and that if there are, it should be in a capacity where they do not determine the pace of energy access and renewable energy for industrialization. Maybe to some extent we would open up negotiations to triple Ps, which is the public-private partnerships, which can to some extent be viewed as vehicles for progressiveness. However, what we have on the ground is that they've been viewed as vehicles for profit extraction, mainly by multinational companies based in the global north. as past experiences have showed. So there's a key role that the AFDB needs to play, particularly on how they can center the 10-year business strategy into the global financial architecture. And within that 10-year business strategy as well, it's off the backdrop, again, of the World Bank spring meetings, where they did announce that they will be embarking on a partnership with the World Bank to launch an energy initiative, essentially, that would bring energy access to 300 million Africans by 2030, which is great, which is quite ambitious, which is exactly what we need the AFDB, who are mandated with the World Bank, to actually tackle poverty, be it energy poverty or socioeconomic poverty, right? The problem that came out of that essentially was, from what we gathered as CSOs across Africa, the interactions between the two presidents were quite clear and concise. However, this was not actually done in consultation with other senior management bodies of the bank. So the Africa Energy Summit that's meant to happen to usher in this new collaboration between the AFDB and the World Bank based on the 300 million energy access by 2030 has proven to be a little bit difficult. That's why there hasn't been a date that's been decided. As far as we know, as civil society, it's going to happen in Africa. But for sure, they haven't decided on a date because that announcement was done without consulting EDs, for example, senior management, and also, civil society committees that are actually meant to represent CSOs from different conglomerates across the global south. So there's been a back and forth in terms of how that summit would essentially look like. What they have agreed upon is a date of either 2 weeks before COP29 or 2 weeks after COP29, most likely 2 weeks before COP29, in order for us to create this synergized, synthetic, threaded effort around what would be announced, as seeing as that this year is an essential year for finance. The other initiative that was mentioned that is about to scale up is the Desert to Power initiative, which is going to be implemented across the Sahel region and might reach Ethiopia and Kenya as well. This one is going to be a solar panel project that's going to be initiated. Funding has been and continues to be raised around that, and it has started to kick off with different stakeholders being involved. But however, we are still trying as civil society to really be involved within that process in terms of how that would look like. So there are two essential pillars in terms of renewable energy. That is the Desert to Power initiative.
Dean. Sorry, we are running short of time. So in fact, we will really hear from you more during our question and answer session. So thank you very much for this really insightful talk. And there are a lot of questions regarding Africa are coming up, and we will really take up those questions. Now I would call upon Gilgore, GACE campaign leader, Bankwatch, to give insights on EBRD. Gilgore has more than 10 years of experience working on volunteering in the non-governmental sector in Croatia, and before joining Bankwatch, he spent 4 years working as a legal officer for a nature conservation NGO association, BirdLife Croatia, and he has a law degree from the university. He is based in Zagreb, Croatia, and speaks Croatian and English. Thanks, Gilgore, for joining us. And during the World Bank Group Spring meeting, the president of the EBRD, quoting Big Shift Global GACE campaign, and it's stated in the Banker magazine that they must engage with the fossil fuel industry to meet the methane pledge. And afterwards, Sophie responded well that allocation of public money to promoting unproven false solutions is questionable. So in that context, when analyzing the EBRD's financing strategies, particularly in relation to gas-related investments, what critical assessments emerge? Over to you, Gilgore.
Thanks, Fiza. Yeah, just concerning the EBRD president, Sophie was quite right. Reducing methane reductions is also profitable for those oil and gas companies. There is a significant gap in necessary investment for the clean technologies that where MBB should be like pioneers. And they are the ones who should be responsible for the reducing of the methane emission. That's on the industry. And we should also try to remove those emissions, not only reduce them. I mean, I would say that's also as a part of the greenwashing done by the MDBs and the industry. Just as an example, in Europe, when there was the methane regulation now, industry also had the same position as the other stakeholders. So it's in their interest to reduce their emissions because it's profitable for them. Okay, now moving to the presentation. Yeah, just for those who are not familiar, Bankwatch is a network or organization based in Central and Eastern Europe and Central Asia. We've been working on public finance since mid-90s, starting with EBRD and EIB, and then moving to the other sources of public finance which are relevant for our region. I would Fiza kindly ask you to turn the page. Okay, a few basic information about the EBRD. I apologize in advance for those for whom this information is already familiar. EBRD was founded in 1991 after the dissolution of Soviet Union. Its mandate was to reform the economies of Central and Eastern European countries and turn them to the market economies. Its emphasis still today is on private sector. What's important, EBRD has recently expanded its operation to sub-Saharan Africa. Since from 2025, it will involve 6 additional countries in Africa. Just to give you a glimpse of the size of the EBRD, because I mean it's much smaller in terms of the investment than the World Bank Group or the EIB. According to the official EBRD data, in 2022, EBRD has invested circa 13 million euros in all of its investments, and of it, like circa 2 billion went to the energy-related investment. This figure will differ a bit from the figure that I will show later. That was from the latest Oil Change International report on G20 and MDB finance. I would kindly ask to turn the page. Sure. Okay. I wanted to showcase some of the most important policies within the EBRD that are dealing with the energy-related investments. Probably last year's annual meeting was more important in terms of the EBRD than this year's. Last year, there were discussions on the revision of the energy sector strategy. Unfortunately, there was a great momentum within the bank in 2021 period when there was like a huge group of progressive countries led by EU shareholders. Unfortunately, that momentum died with the escalation of the Russian invasion towards Ukraine, with the following energy crisis and the change of government in some of the EU countries. And we are stuck within the EBRD with the gas for the following 5 years. I mean, that's the timeline of the strategy. It applies from 2024. The second most important policy within the EBRD is the Paris alignment methodology. As probably all of you know, I mean, EBRD was the first to come out and publish the methodology. Bank is claiming that all their operations are aligned with the Paris alignment from the 1st of January of 2023. We don't share the same opinion. I mean, since they are still able to finance fossil fuels, we cannot speak about any kind of Paris alignment. And yeah, probably the third one, which is quite important, is the environmental and social policy, which deals with the way and procedures how the EBRD assesses individual projects and risk, environmental ones, climate ones, and socials associated with those. It's also important because it deals with the cumulative emissions, which are quite important for gas projects, and with the emissions in general. Unfortunately, there was a revision this year. Public consultation just finished last year, but these things weren't addressed in the policy. I would kindly ask you to turn the page. Okay, so what is possible to finance from the fossil fuel side in the EBRD? EBRD was quite fast with phasing out the fossil fuel financing. It happened already in 2019. But I mean, even before, from 2014, EBRD wasn't like financing new coal generation. Similar development happened with oil, but and most of the oil was excluded with the latest Paris alignment methodology. Now we are left, I mean, with some parts of the gas supply chain. EBRD cannot finance anymore any kind of upstream gas. Unfortunately, there is the allowance to finance midstream or downstream projects. but also non-capex related operations, which means like other financial instruments to energy companies that have significant fossil fuel assets in processes such as like privatization of companies or providing liquidity. Also, it's possible still to finance fossil fuels through the operations with financial intermediaries. Yeah, this is like a quote from the start of the new energy sector strategy. I will show later that it doesn't happen like that in practice. I mean, bank is saying here that, I mean, they are trying to phase out fossil fuels. Unfortunately, the devil is in the details. They are only claiming it for the unabated fossil fuels. And I mean, their position, at least on paper, is that they will increasingly finance any kind of fossil fuel project. Please turn the page. These are the EBRD criteria for fossil fuel investments. These are now only relevant for gas because besides gas, EBRD can only invest into the downstream oil and only into the refineries, and only if they show significant decarbonization impact. So these are mainly criteria for gas investments. I mean, quite clear, Paris aligned, projects must be Paris aligned according to the Paris methodology, be consistent with the low carbon pathways, choosing in between, bank chooses in between pathways, which is the most credible one. It can be the NDC, long-term strategies. Unfortunately, they are not on the stage of maturity yet in any of the countries. Projects need to pass the test of carbon lock-in or stranded asset risk. And there is the economic viability test for projects with significant greenhouse gas emissions. Besides that, there is like the specific condition only for gas projects, and that any project needs to have like a clear plan to minimize methane leakages from the relevant asset, but it's not also defined and specified how the bank will assess this and how to assess if something is credible. Please turn the slide. Yes, from some kind of general trends concerning the EBRD financing for energy, I would say that we can already, in the period after the 2015, assess that there is some decrease of financing for fossil fuels, and that there is some kind of scale up of the renewables. Unfortunately, there is also a lack of data for financial intermediaries, so we cannot assess all the amounts within the bank. Yeah, the next slide, I mean, not in the next slide, but I mean, this is the data from the latest report of Oil Change International. In the period of 2020 to 2022, EBRD has invested at around 3.3 billion into the energy. Half of it went into the clean energy, meaning renewables, solar, wind, geothermal. 1/3 of it went to the other sources according to the OTSI methodology. By other, it means like the energy investments where the source of the energy is unclear, or where the projects are non-fossil fuels project but have some kind of significant impact, and the rest of the money went to gas, like 15%. So looking at the project summary documents on the EBRD website, besides these usual suspects, I mean, from the pipelines and power plants, EBRD is also investing a lot into the district heating systems, into the renovation and expansion of those. And the also important part of financing are the liquidity loans, and these started to increase from the 2022. I mean, we can see them in the whole region, from Bulgaria to Kazakhstan. Concerning the renewables investments, I mean, EBRD was already from the 2010s pioneering some of the wind and solar projects, but has now also stepped up into the developments of grids. We can see like a lot of transmission and distribution projects and a lot of projects on the demand side, I mean, to reduce the energy consumption, from smart metering to energy efficiency measures. Also, this is like the first project of this kind within the EBRD pipeline, a green hydrogen project, unfortunately in Uzbekistan, which has at the moment problems with the, I mean, supply of electricity and issues with the, I mean, water supply. So probably it's not the ideal location to pilot this type of project there. Yeah, please move away. Yeah, I listed some of the biggest projects, I mean, in the previous period within the bank. Most of these were bank financed in some kind of consortium between different MDBs. From these, only Black Sea Media Gas, which is extraction, and the other is Mytilenos, are constructed. The rest of them, although approved like a few years ago, are still not constructed, are still under different stages of construction. Please, next slide. Last project that EBRD financed, North Macedonia gasification. It's quite important because, in our opinion, it differs from what EBRD stated in their latest ESS. They are financing 3 new pipelines in North Macedonia, one in connection to Greece. They are claiming that the project is hydrogen ready, although they are also saying that there is not enough. They don't know where the hydrogen will come from and what will be the price of it in the future. Project will, significantly larger than what's the current consumption in Macedonia for like 3 times. So it's unclear how can they claim that it's Paris aligned and future ready. Some of the issues that we raised during the protest and also now in the IPA mechanism that was brought against the project. There were no national public consultations for the project, and both the national government and the EBRD failed to assess the scope 3 emissions, which are the main impact from this project, like burning of gas. I mean, that will be transported via this pipeline. Please, last slide. What's next for the EBRD? I mean, from what we can gather within the bank, there is some kind of intention to finance new interconnectors within the Western Balkans region, mostly to steer the region away from the Russian gas sources. Also some CHPs in Poland, and these similar projects as before, district heating system and liquidity loans. Our hypothesis is that most of the gas direct financing will end soon, probably before the end of the current ESS. That will happen something similar to the bank's coal phase out. What shows some kind of positive development within the bank, we got the results from the North Macedonia board vote. Most of the EU shareholders abstain from voting, but the EU is issue at the moment because they're, really pressing on the diversification from Russian supply. At the moment, on EBRD, we cannot see new policy windows because most of the processes are finished. It's necessary to engage on the bank with the case-by-case basis, address the bank's reputation risk because of the financing of fossil fuels, and work with the progressive shareholders, mostly not on the level of the EDs, but go to the national ministries, to the treasuries, Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kilgore, for your insightful presentation. And with this presentation, we have in fact completed our webinar time, but in fact, there are a few questions there and we need to really conclude our webinar. So we are shortly opening the floor for questions and answers, and for the moderation of this session, I would request Janet Milango. She works as the Manager Energy Transition within the Global Political Strategy Department at CAN International, and she has a very impressive profile and work, and she was the active part of the AFDB annual. So over to you, Milango. In the context of running short of time, so we will really appreciate if we can really take a few questions, very pertinent and selective one. Over to you, Milango. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiza, and all our speakers. Really, that was very insightful perspectives and contributions that you've all made. It's been very interesting also as you're all speaking to try and see, what the trends are across the different multilateral development banks in the different regions. And really that will be the focus of this question and answer stroke discussion session. So please feel free to ask questions if you have any other, but also just some commentary, even in the Q&A function or the chat on silent features that you notice across the board. And so as we wait for people to probably raise their hands or put those in chat, I'll just start off by saying that I find it, from all the speakers, I see a recurrent theme. And as much as these banks are all, working in different contexts. And for me, I feel like probably part of the problem here is what the realization or the understanding of why we're transiting and what we're supposed to be transiting to. I think that is also missing within the banks, because I work largely on renewable energy, and I can tell you for a fact, it's not just about a different fuel, a different resource. It's about a different energy system, one that really gives back to the community, engages the community, and all the speakers have mentioned this. Issues around inclusion, public participation, all these banks going beyond their own policies, really, and really doing away with gas, because you see gas still coming back. There have been several forums recently, especially within the IEA, the International Energy Agency sphere. We've had the Clean Cooking Summit, there was an energy efficiency summit. You could still see adlibs of gas coming back. Some of these banks that we just talked about today were actually very heavy participants there, such as the AFDB. So there's really need to really focus on what system we're looking to achieve here. But I'm interested, as I mentioned, to hear from everybody else, and if there are any other questions for the participants, for the speakers, then please feel free. This is the time.
There's a hand from Grace.
Yes, Grace.
All right. Thank you very much to all the speakers, and I hope I'm audible. I really wanted to quickly compliment on what the speakers, especially touching on Africa, have really outlined. And I think also this goes to the sentiment that has been brought by Janet, that we really need to work on the narrative that we are putting out. And I think we've seen this from our engagements with the FDB and the World Bank, and even in the recent FDB AGM, we noted that the World Bank is still, and the FDB mainly is still not very well aligned in terms of understanding the narrative of moving from fossils to the renewables. So I think in essence, therefore, is to say that as civil society, we still really need to build a strong narrative on why we are moving from fossils to renewables. And so I think that is a direction that we really need to strengthen as CSOs. And secondly, as well, is that there is the issue of moving to renewables, but how are we doing the renewables? Because we need to do the renewables right. And also going back to the sentiments that were brought about the recently launched 10-year plan. And when you look at that plan as well, they still focus on a lot of mega projects. So that to me, therefore, tells me that we really need to look at how the bank is doing these projects, and also advising the bank in terms of making sure that there's impact in terms of these projects that are being done, reaching out to the first mile communities. So not only thinking about mega projects, but also thinking about how can these projects, the new projects, the transition, how is it going to reach the last, or what you call the first mile now? So how does the community benefit in terms of these investments? And also now to my last sentiment, looking at the career alignment discussion. So I think I'll have a comment and a question. And my comment is that when we are engaging with the banks in the region and the FDB mainly, I think in our last discussions, the FDB came out clearly and said that gas, when you look at the pre-alignment, there's no mention of gas. So why are you coming up and talking about the bank needs to move away from gas in order to be aligned to the pre-alignment, to the Paris Agreement? So I think also as we are nearing the anniversary of the Paris alignment discussions, we need to really bring these conversations to the AfDB and also see how we can support the alignment, Paris-alignment conversations that have just started at the AfDB. And the last part of my submission is how can we rethink this entire conversation in terms of input on the fact that, we are still not having fossil gas exclusion in the Paris alignment. How can we as CSOs start this conversation? And I think as Rick was working also very closely with our partners in the region, are really looking at ways to initiate the conversation on having a fossil fuel and gas exclusion policy in both the AfDB and the World Bank. Thank you, Fiza, and back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Grace. I'm not sure which of the speakers would like to tackle this one, just with your thoughts on, basically what Grace was asking is how can we organize ourselves to win as civil society? How can we do this better? How can we intervene better? Maybe Dean, you have some thoughts?
Sorry, I didn't really understand the question. So if you could try and break it down for me in a way that I can answer it, that would be great.
Yeah, the question by Grace basically was, we've had all of this, that there's still a lot of consideration and planning around gas projects and even assistance of gas projects and the like in the different regions. So what can CSOs do better to really combat this going forward, seeing as there's an urgency to it as well?
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, so as looking at specifically from a public finance perspective, right? I think as CSOs in Africa, we are yet to organize ourselves much more robustly. And I think that's the first point, which is why it's important to also mention that we're going to be launching a public finance working group in Africa, looking at African matters. So this is really something that would be looking at the power sector on energy. So we are trying to convene that group. I think it should be launching in August. And I think that would be like the stepping stone. And I think that would be the moment where we actually have a common Africa position on how we understand public finance and the role the African Development Bank can play as a stepping stone towards that. There will be some individuals who are already part of the African Development Bank CSO committee, for example, under energy, that will be coming for that as well. And further on, to add on that, we are actually trying our best through inside campaigning to get accreditation for CSOs to attend the Africa Energy Summit and open up that dialogue with the African Development Bank. And all this will be communicated through this new public finance on energy working group for Africa that's going to just look at AfDB, World Bank, and ACFISIM, but obviously being supported and being a member as well of the Big Shift Coalition. But we just thought it would be great to really hone in and really focus on public finance and build that capacity from Africa, which we think historically has been a little lacking. I think we've done well with unpacking climate finance, but public finance is a little bit different, right? So I think I would respond to that in that manner and say I think it's a good time to be involved, and happy to share more information at a later date around that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Dean. And I really like your choice of words, that we need to organize robustly. So that is the difference between what we've been doing all along and now and what we need to be doing going forward. In that same thread, I don't know whether there's another speaker who would like to quickly comment on that. And while commenting on that, just a bit of thoughts as well, a welcome on whether you see the Summit of the Future as an opportunity as well, us organizing ourselves better, or civil society also making some strides.
Well, I think on my end, just to quickly come in, Summit of the Future is very important with the role that Namibia and Germany are playing. They seem to be the two countries that are really pushing, especially under the G77 group, for countries to adopt gas as a transition fuel. So we are yet to organize as Africa around that. But I think that's something that's really going to be, I think it'll be more of like us supporting other existing networks that are doing the work, like the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which PowerShift Africa, Don't Gas Africa, Can Africa are already supporting. So I think we're all going to convene under that and really have a robust pushback. The big question mark is Germany because of their renewable energy policy that they have announced at the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. But that doesn't fall in line, with their gas investments in Nigeria and also their position towards the Summit of the Future. So it's going to be a good day in the office looking at that and seeing how best we can come together as Africa. So the answer is yes, and I think there will be some calls being led by, most likely if it's an action, ACG as well from Africa's end in order for us to really create something really mindful. But I do know that during that time, in New York, it will be more of like movements coming together. So we're going to all convene under that umbrella. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And actually, your responses have a lot of relevance, of course, across the regions. And basically, it's a global overview of how we need to be organizing ourselves. And I don't know whether there's any other questions.
Thank you, Janet. In fact, we are really running very much short of time. So thank you so much. Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Gilgore. And so moving towards conclusion of today's webinar, I would request Mohammad Lamin Saidi Khan, movement builder and campaign strategist, head of Building Power Department at Can International, based in Dakar, Senegal. So over to you, Mohammad, for vote of thanks and summarizing today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiza, hello, everybody. Good afternoon from the land of Taranga. It's called the land of hospitality. I wanted to appreciate and thank you all for joining the inaugural, webinar of the gas talks, the MDBs, and the gas webinar series by the Global Dawn Fund Gas Working Group of the Big Shift Global Campaign. I also want to appreciate, our, powerful speakers, esteemed speakers. Maj from Rikos. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly, but I really want to appreciate, every speaker. Rayan from the NGO Forum of Africa Development Bank, and Dean, our brother from Don't Gas Africa, Gilgore from the Bankwatch, and as well Hussein from Hindu Consortium. Your presentations and whatever you have shared have really been very useful, sharing and very in-depth knowledge, and issues have been shared here. I want to also maybe appreciate my colleague again, Janet Melongo, for invaluable remarks and moderation of the question and answer session, and as well, critically pointed out the African Development Bank and the financial institutions work, which illustrated the critical work or critical role that multilateral development banks are shaping in renewable energy financing, which is critical. We need to provide and showcase both the resistance element, which is the gas and fossil fuel advancements, and then by providing and introducing the hope part, which is the renewable energy aspect. Also, I want to let me highlight that, Maj have highlighted, given us insights on the alarming trends of the significant financing of the fossil fuel industry, particularly the fossil gas by the World Bank, which we really need to resist and then work together to, push back on. Rayan remarks on the, The ADB annual general meetings underscores the persistent challenges of the bank's gas addictions that we have been seeing, that the World Bank is, peddling this false narrative that gas is a transitional fuel that need to be halted and need to be challenged. So, critical issues around that, critics around, around that, really need to be challenged, to ensure that we safeguard the framework that highlights the need to enhance transparency and accountability to protect communities from the harm. So all of us in the space really need to push back on this false narrative that gas is a transitional fuel. I will want to conclude by, highlighting that the Africa Development Bank meeting that, point out the launch of their 10th years of strategy, providing, affordable, reliable, sustainable energy, modern energy by 2033, showcased by Dean's presentation, is something that we really need to look into and ensure that the phasing out of fossil financing around the World Africa Development Bank development agendas. Let me conclude by thanking and appreciating the Big Shift Global, so that I don't keep you up too much here because you're already late, for organizing this webinar series. And then I hope that we'll all make it into future webinar series. And thank you all so much for attending. And thank you, Faiza. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you to all the Big Shift team for a great webinar series kickoff.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Muhammad, for your concluding remarks. And as this webinar concludes, that there is the urgency of redirecting public funds away from the fossil fuel industries towards sustainable renewable energy sources is paramount. While reducing methane emissions from the energy sector is important, ending methane emissions should be the immediate focus. So thank you very much for joining us. We will come soon with another exciting webinar full of learning and insights. Till then, goodbye. Take very good care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.